Okay, this is such a fun conversation. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you something because,
Sure.
okay, this is a common suggestion by holistic doctors. They tell patients, if you want to be healthy, you got to avoid gluten and dairy. You've heard that over and over, right?
Many
Avoid
times.
gluten and dairy. I was like, no, I love cheese. That's one of the worst sacrifices, So, okay, I want you to explain about, so obviously you're going to talk about the pasteurization process.
Sure.
So what is the pasteurized milk when that gets made into a cheese? So we know about the pasteurized milk. And what about the cheese that came from pasteurized milk?
Well, it's no longer bioactive. The enzymes are denatured. The proteins have been changed. So yeah, there's casein there. Yeah, there's protein there. But it's no longer it's not alive. When a holistic doctor is saying, get off gluten and get off dairy, it makes sense if you think about it. They haven't been trained about raw milk. They're trained about dairy as a pasteurized product, which is highly allergenic. And you're also dealing with patients that have leaky gut. Most of them have leaky gut because the permeability is so high in the intestines because the mucosal lining is missing. And you got all these Peyer's patches that are wide open in the intestines and things are being absorbed in the bloodstream that shouldn't be there. So you have all these gluten sensitivities, all these kind of weird things you would not have, generally speaking, if your intestinal lining was intact and your junctions were tight and you had a mucosal lining that worked, you had biodiversity and the digestive process functioned. So what they're doing is they're looking at all the patients that are coming to them and seeing leaky gut syndrome and saying, don't eat things that get in your bloodstream. And these are the worst of them, gluten and dairy. Well, we're saying is rebuilding mucosal lining using raw dairy, that's, by the way, not allergenic. And you will then start to transcend the problems you have into a place where your gut intestinal structure is correct. And you'll have these mucosal linings and the biodiversity. And also, there's prebiotics, which is the food that feeds bacteria. There's probiotics, the bacteria themselves, and diversity of them. And then there's postbiotics. And postbiotics are basically the metabolites, the poop of the bacteria. But that stuff is critical to building blocks, and it's there for a reason. Other bacteria use it to build things, and your body uses it to build things. Really, really, really important. And raw milk has all three of those things. And it just takes time. It took a while to get to where you are. It's going to take a while to get back. And so I would strongly suggest people to say whole foods, nothing added, short ingredient lists, like 3 things: love, milk, and that's it. That's it. You want to have very short, nothing you can't pronounce, nothing you can't, you have to look up, very short. And really, really things that would rot if you left it in the sun. You need to eat things that the rat would eat. You actually have to eat things that are digestible and whole, nutrient dense.